Sae'Von Springer is the owner and founder of Native Assets. Any views expressed by Sae'Von or his guest are their own thoughts and opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Native Assets or the guest's respective employer. Any guest appearance by representatives of Web3, NFT, crypto, or any other kind of organization does not constitute an endorsement by Native Assets or the guest's respective employer. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be mistaken as financial advice. Always conduct your own due diligence and consult a qualified professional when considering any investments of any kind. Great day, great day. Welcome back to the show. Sae'Von Springer, founder and managing partner of Native Assets. And today we have a legend in the building. And I say legend because in this time period where a lot of people some folks are second guessing why they may have gotten into this space when, we're having such catastrophes like what we've seen with several bank failures over the last 7 days, let alone the fact that it's a bear market. But as the old adage goes, the bear markets are for those that are building. And that is really why I'm so excited about what's going on today, because it is a intersection of technology, what this gentleman is working on. And one of the most important technologies, not just today, but of quite probably our whole lifetimes, because of what that technology encompasses. And yes, I am talking about AI, artificial intelligence. Some people wish it was called augmented intelligence. Semantics aside, I would like to welcome co-founder, CEO of Altered State Machine, Mr. David McDonald. Welcome to the show. How are you doing, sir?
Awesome. Nice to be here. Thank you. Doing pretty well, considering, the events down our way in New Zealand that we've had recently. But we've forged on and we've been doing a lot of exciting stuff, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yes, no, absolutely. And also grateful that y'all have been able to stay safe. I live in Georgia. I live in Atlanta. We don't get too much wild weather. We had a couple of tornadoes over the last couple of decades, but they just, rip some windows out of some skyscrapers. There's never too much damage. So always glad to see when folks are holding up well. And I also think that it's worth mentioning all of the work that you all do from a charitable perspective as well. So if you want to, you probably used to opening these conversations up talking about what ASM is, but can you talk briefly about the most recent endeavor that y'all did to try to give back to the community?
Yeah, it's been something that's ingrained in our DNA as a company, as an ecosystem, is giving back. And I think it reflects a lot of, at least people that we interact with in the space. It reflects the attitude of a lot of people in this space is that it's about communities coming together and giving back where we can. And, we've done quite a few now when we've had the opportunity to do so. The stuff for Auckland City Mission, which is the sort of primary homeless care organisation where we're from. I think it was $1 million. I think we rose for them last year, I believe, and then more recently with the disaster relief auction that the team did, and a whole bunch of communities in New Zealand from the sort of blockchain space got around and supported that cause, and hopefully we've made some people's lives a little bit easier.
Yes, no, I'm sure y'all definitely have made a sizable impact in your community. So if you could, and also we talked about this before we started recording, I'm making the assumption that most people really listening to this at this time are familiar with the ecosystem. But if you could, at a high level, walk people through what Altered State Machine is, non-fungible intelligence, and then we'll go deeper and deeper down as we go on in the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So Altered State Machine is we're not really a startup anymore. We're but further on than that. But we're a company that works with artificial intelligence in an attempt to democratize it and make it accessible to as many people as possible. Not just using the technology, but being in control of the destiny of the technology. And we do that by working with a lot of blockchain technologies as well as other technologies. But essentially, the goal is to put the knowledge out there in the hands of the people and the control out there in the hands of the people.
Okay. Now, this is really what I want us to dig into in the first part of this conversation, this idea of why altered state machine and a protocol like this is important, because today, as it just happens to be, ChatGPT 3 became ChatGPT 4, and that's obviously taken the world by storm, as most people who never really realized they were interacting with AI, let alone in the way that they were able to do with this tool set. A lot of those folks might look at something like that, and to them, that might be damn near end game. Like, yo, this is already helping me write code emails or do this or do that. So aside from what the actual technology can do, right, when you talk about helping shape where it is headed, what I think about is some of the biases that exist and how the data sets that go into these algorithms, the fact that ultimately, you know, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, these are corporations. OpenAI, technically, I guess, is not a corporation, but they are entities that ultimately are guiding where that technology is going, and they deem when the public is allowed to get access to it, what might not be suitable for the public to get access to, sort of these paternalistic decisions that are being made. And I'm sure some of them are good decisions, and other ones we wouldn't exactly know because we're not privy to those conversations. So if you could, can you unpack how you all are thinking about the ethics and the philosophy around this technology, and how this tech will enable people to have more say in that aspect?
Yeah, so things like ChatGPT and Midjourney and DALL-E and Stable Diffusion, all these recent technologies that have sort of captured the eye of the public, have really brought AI to light quite recently. But that's kind of just the tip of the iceberg of what AI is currently doing and how it is actually influencing your life. So when you interact with, when you do a search on Google, or you swipe up on TikTok, or look at your news feed on your social media, you're interacting with AI. When you go and get a bank loan, you're potentially interacting with AI.
Yeah.
When you go and get your KYC processed for any reason, you're potentially interacting with AI. And it pops up in a lot of places where most people are not aware. So it's been around us for a long time. It's now sort of into the public consciousness with some of these new things, and I think it's time that people were educated on how it works and what it does, and why it's important for them to have some control over its future. It is quite literally the most powerful tool that humanity has ever created, and I think we owe it to ourselves to make sure that that it's democratized, and that people understand what it is and how it's used. So what we're attempting to do is, A, first of all, educate; B, provide tools that make it easier for people to manage their own data and that goes into this AI, and also provide tools for people to train and manipulate and shape AI and their reflection, so it can be a representative tool for humanity, rather than the centralized thing that's controlled by a few people who have the money and the means to do so.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I was curious to get your thought process on is the fact that you all are at this moment focusing on the gaming side of things versus what most people are now experimenting with, which has a lot more to do with, let's call it, productivity. And even recently, Kathy Wood, I have my notes off to the side, she was doing a press event recently, and someone was asking her basically like, hey, what do you think is going to be the killer application for AI? And she basically made the point saying, this isn't that. You know, in the mobile era, that's what we were looking for. But for AI, it's really about a killer feature. In her opinion, and the data that ARC has done, that killer feature is productivity. So given that you all are focused on the gaming side of things, but it's been communicated that these brains, when these tools open up for developers and all of this, they'll be able to be used in a myriad of context. How do you how would you respond to that comment of hers, thinking that the killer feature of AI is productivity, given that there is this whole other slew of ways that the AI can be used, and you all are at this point focusing on more of that creative angle of it?
Yeah, great question. I suppose when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, doesn't it? Um, and you might be, we're going to see a lot of disruption in the productivity space, but it's not going to include you. They're not going to include the people they can replace with this increased productivity in the process of replacing them. So for the majority of people to understand to understand artificial intelligence, we're going to need to access them in ways that are that they're not being replaced in. And one of those ways is entertainment and gaming. This is the one thing that anybody with access to a piece of technology is going to want to do, is they're going to want to get on it and entertain themselves in some sort of way. So we can reach a lot of people with the education side and expose them to the tools that allow them to manage their own data. So once we can get in there, then we can then lead into other things like productivity. But instead of being replaced, people will have the tools to replace themselves and not be put out by these systems. So in a way they're right in saying that, but what we are trying to attempt to do is not take the people out of that process, and not to mention games are fun. And they're not going to go away. But it's a low controversy entry point. It's one that we can reach a large audience with, and begin to teach the fundamentals about self-sovereign data and all those things that are important to democratizing AI. And it's a way that we can get a really wide reach in a short amount of time, to prevent this AI coming in and just replacing everybody's jobs, and nobody having a say in what goes on, just stealing everybody's data to replace everybody's jobs, and no one having a say in what's going on.
People being replaced by AI, regardless of AI's or ASM's success, that train has kind of already left the station, though, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. 100%.
One, I'm curious if you just have like a ballpark timeline on when we will see that band where the expanse of the technology reduces people's ability to work, and then when it actually increases their ability to work because of where the technology is. But also, too, how you see ASM in the foreseeable future, the midterm, being able to potentially mitigate or offset some of that, if at all.
So I think the first part in that is the data. So a lot of the reason why these systems, these new AIs that have popped up, like Stability AI and ChatGPT, is that it's just taken all the data it can without paying people for it. Just basically just all the data that was available to consume, it's just hoovered it in, and now it's got a massive data set that it can train itself on, which is great. I mean, they've proven that the technology works. That's awesome. But no one's all that private data of yours and all that creativity of that people have put out there into the world, they're not getting any benefit back for providing that. I think that's probably one of the first steps to creating a more harmonious relationship with AI, is that we make sure we know where the data's come from, and we make sure that the people who are provided get rewarded for providing it. Otherwise, we're going to end up in a situation where people get replaced, people are teaching these AIs to replace them, and then losing everything for the pleasure, right? So
Can I
that's
jump in
kind
there
of
for a moment?
yeah, sure.
So when you mentioned the data sets that they've been able to train themselves on, they've amassed that data from people spending decades online, browsing, shopping, dumping in a bunch of data that you can't really just overnight replicate because there's been so much time that goes into it. So if I'm to make a few cognitive leaps about what are some longer term plans from ASM, are y'all thinking about some sort of mechanism where perhaps someone has like a browser extension, they flip on a switch, and now they're opting in to feed some of what they're doing as data into ASM in a way that still keeps it a bit private through the donuts and all this other stuff that y'all have going on, so that ASM can eventually get to a point where it can natively provide functionality like what people are seeing from tools like ChatGPT, because now it has the data to do so without needing to. Hopefully that question makes some sense.
Yeah, it does, and you know that the ASM mission in a lot of ways is also the Futureverse mission. ASM was born out of that mission, that the original mission of Aaron McDonald, to provide these tools and provide this self-sovereignty to people, and to provide an ecosystem where a bunch of companies can succeed together, and take on the larger incumbents like Google and Facebook, and now look where we are. We've done exactly what we promised, and we're at that point. But in combination with all the other things that the Futureverse ecosystem is doing around self-sovereignty of data, so the recent Future Pass that got launched is the first step towards giving access to self-sovereign profiles and accounts for people to take control of their data and take control of their finances online, but angled towards a mass market where they're no longer you don't longer have to have a black belt in blockchain to
a black belt in blockchain
yeah, to interact with it. It's therefore the people, therefore everybody who's familiar with the online experience can come on and start interacting with these systems, and taking control back of their data. That's kind of one component to it, and then the stuff that comes out of that means that we've now got a way of identifying where data has come from, and when we use it, we can make sure that value flows back to that originator of that data, who has a self-sovereign identity. And you're going to see some of this stuff start to pop up with Alter State Machine, particularly around the art. That's pretty controversial subject right now, AI generative art. We've got a system that we've built that allows creators to be involved in the process, and not an opt-out system like others have chosen to do, but an opt-in system where they say, actually, this is my style of art. Give it to the AI to learn about it, and then say, if you want to use my style, then you either purchase one of my NFTs that enables you to lose that style, or I get a royalty for every derivative that is made from that style. And really include artists in the process, the creators in the process of using this AI and providing these tools to people. So that's one example. The other example is obviously the little game models that we have running around playing soccer and boxing and doing all sorts of fun things. That's a fully self-contained neural network that you own and train and can trade. Pretty basic concept, but it does introduce people to the idea of that AI can evolve and learn and from your inputs, and you should own that, and you should be able to decide what you do with it. Fundamentally, I think we got, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I think we got a little bit complacent in the age of social media, where we've kind of accepted that we don't own our digital identities. We don't own our activity online. We don't, is valueless. and in that complacency, companies have come along and just sucked up this hugely valuable data that we've just handed over in our complacency, and now have all this power at their hands. So I think we just got to kind of snap out of that a little bit and think, actually, no, that is really valuable. My identity, digital identity, should be my identity, because it's just as much my identity as my physical identity is. And in some cases, for some people, it's more than their physical identity. So I think we're going to kind of snap out of this complacency a little bit around our data and our digital sovereignty, and realize that you are actually valuable in the physical world and in the digital world.
Now, do you think that there is ever going to be a path towards some sort of collaboration where the Googles, the Microsofts also realize the folly of their ways, whether it be because they're realizing this internally or because regulations are kind of forcing them to have this recognition? Do you see a path towards collaborating and working with them and being able to help them bridge that gap where they begin to renounce some of that data or control that they've had over people and opt for this system instead?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not complete pessimist, and I think regulation is going to play a big role in that. And I think, but the only way that regulation happens is people participating in the democratic system, people being educated and understanding what kind of things they should be demanding of their governments. So education is a huge part of that. Getting out in the public consciousness, the importance of these things is a big part of that. And I think we're 100% open to working with incumbent organisations, and helping them navigate this space. So I'm hoping, and we deal with several billion-dollar companies, multi-billion-dollar companies, as you know, through our partnerships, who are a bit more aware of this space than some of the others. So it's not impossible for companies the big companies that are now in control of a lot of things to come around and to understand the point of views that we're out there preaching.
Yeah, and I also suppose that is the whole value of building a protocol level solution versus just a single standalone application. Is like, hey, now it's kind of plug and play, boom, here are the APIs, here's how you really integrate these data sets and get those flows moving. So definitely excited to see where that goes. Wrapping up that particular line, that question, when you spoke yesterday about the brain being a conduit and it just being the conduit that allows you to access the personalization that is more so tied to your Futureverse pass, I hadn't heard it phrased in that way before, and it really made me go like, aha. And so in theory, conceptually, wouldn't it be possible for you all to use the brain as a pass-through to access any AI-generated tool and then use the Future Pass personalization data that's attached to it to then customize the same way that we see people already taking ChatGPT, making it browser extensions so it can access current day information and just extend its capability? The same thing will be possible in theory with the brains and the Future Pass combo, correct?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly how it's designed. And brains are there to provide a diversity driver that can be consistent from use case to use case. But sometimes you might not need diversity drivers at all, and you might just want to pass through that conduit, and that's of course something you can do directly from your sort of Future Pass identity. So they're primarily designed around applications that require lots of divergent thinking to solve problems, and provide an opportunity to crowdsource collaboration with AI to solve those problems, whether it's the problem of kicking soccer goals into a goal, or more I don't
more
want to say
compute-heavy
substantial,
task.
yeah, or more boring tasks like accounting. Um,
Hmm.
you know, there's occasions where you need diversity drivers to make sure that you're attacking the problem in lots of different kinds of ways, and that's what the brains are good for, and that's what the genome matrices are there to provide. Yeah, different ways of looking at problems through the lens of a person and an AI are collaborating on solving that problem.
Perfect. And then just one small note, obviously you're privy to the information that you're privy of. And at one point you say, oh, of course he can do this thing. And it's like, well, for us who aren't working on it day in, day out, some of these things aren't as immediately obvious to us, but it is good to know that it has been built with this in mind. And I think that's also a perfect segue for us to talk about what was definitely a hot, controversial debate inside of the community a few months back when it was communicated that there were still some ongoing decisions to be made about the capability difference between a Gen 1 brain and a Gen 2 brain. So just curious, checking in with the time that's passed, how has that conversation progressed internally at ASM? Do y'all have more clarity on that at this moment? How are y'all thinking about that? Because there's definitely, I know there's some people listening to this, myself included, that are like, man, trying to figure out really what that hierarchy is. And I know that in the past it's been mentioned that the hive mind access is something that might get factored in there. So just curious if you could share a little bit of light on that.
Yeah, so Genesis assets across the ecosystem have a privileged place. They have access to things that non-Genesis assets don't have. The Gen 1 or the Genesis brains have, as you've seen, have had access to airdrops and other activities that the Gen 2 brains haven't access. So that's sort of factor number one. The biggest thing about Genesis brains, though, is that they can what we've labeled splice. So you can if you've trained up your Genesis brain on a specific task or a bunch of specific tasks, you can create a clone. No, not exactly a clone. You can create a derivative of it by splicing it together with another brain, where it'll be similar to its parents and inherit the memories from its parents. So the genetic memory will be passed down. That enables people to take Genesis assets, train them up on to be really good at specific tasks, and then create derivatives, and then trade those on the open marketplace if they wish to, or create a whole team of derivatives based off that sort of master that you've created in a Genesis. And that's only available to Genesis assets. So the way I see it when I'm thinking about these game economies and how they work is that you've got to have different tiers of access and different tiers of achievement. So you can't go out with what I think a lot of people in the NFT space have done is gone out with and say, we're going to release this game. Please buy our asset for $100,000. Like you're not going to get a big community playing your game with $100,000 assets. You need to have low barriers to entry to get people, and it can't be unfair for people to be playing the game against. So say you've got one of these $100,000 assets. It can't be impossible for somebody with a $20 asset to compete against you, because that's unfair. It doesn't make an interesting game for anyone. It just becomes a pay to win situation. So the way I sort of mapped it out is that you have the games are all fair, completely fair. No matter what asset you have, you've got an equal chance of winning. That comes down to your skill and training your AI, and the dedication and effort that you put into it. And that's what I think should be the core of any multiplayer game. But there's a separate game off to the side that's called the trading and training game that that you do have an advantage in, because if you're really interested in playing this game, this trading and training game, then you can invest in the premium asset to do that, but that doesn't affect the game at all. So we have these different tiers. So at the top tier, you got the Genesis assets that gives you the biggest access. You can breed those assets and create another tier of assets below that. At the bottom, you've got your Gen 2 assets, and they're just there as the lowest point of entry. Anybody can come in and grab them and start playing games, but you can't breed those. You can't do anything special outside of that with those. And in the middle tier, you've got the derivative assets from the Genesis assets, which catch a higher premium price. They're pre-trained. Their parent assets, their parent Genesis asset, might already have a reputation in the market for being a top tier asset. They're specifically bred to have the desirable attributes and genome matrices for certain games, and enables people to jump in at a higher level, pay a price premium to do so, and get right into the action if they want to, or specifically craft their team in a certain way.
Okay.
So that's kind of the point of Genesis assets right there.
Okay, cool. So I think that most people thought that before that particular AMA, where that, doubt came into people's minds. And I think that that's been reflected on the market side of things as well, is that doubt. So I appreciate you clearing that up. Two things, and then we'll move on from that. One of them, if you could clarify, just because people are going to be like, why didn't you ask to clarify this? Does that mean that to splice a Gen 1 brain will require one Gen 1 brain, multiple Gen 1 brains, or a Gen 1 brain plus something else to be able to do it? And then I have a second question.
You need two to splice, because you've got to create a delta
like hereditary
between them.
Tree.
Yeah, hereditary tree. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Nature's pretty much set up a template for this.
Cool.
It works well.
Once again, I think most people thought that, and I'm not sure if you remember the AMA, but I want to say it was back sometime Q4 of last year, but a question came up and it incited some doubt in the community, or I guess confusion maybe is a better word than doubt, about if it was going to require two Gen 1 brains or one, or if it was going to be something that Gen 2 brains could also do. So really glad to know that we got some clarity there too. Now, the second point, you mentioned that the way that the dynamics are set up, it's a fair game. Effectively, there's no pay to win. But if part of the reason to buy or to splice these Gen 1 brains and then come down is so that you can jump into the game pre-trained, in a way, if I'm jumping in and everything I have is pre-trained, how does, because I'm in my head thinking about it like if you were to put Madden, or y'all were talking about 2K yesterday, you have two AI 2K teams playing, and one is on like all-star level, and then, no pun intended, the other one's on rookie level. The rookie level team could win, but it's very unlikely they're going to beat the all-star team. So could you elaborate a little bit on, like I said, we don't got to spend too much time on it, but is that thinking about it in a fair comparison? Like technically the rookie team could win. It might be a little less likely, but technically it is possible.
No, so the way I think it is that your ceiling is exactly the same. So you might jump in just a little bit above, but that guy, there's no reason why without comparable effort and time, that guy is not going to come up to your level or surpass you. Yeah. Okay. So the thing that I don't like about pay to win games is that you can pay to have a higher ceiling than somebody else. And you never, if you don't have
that
$2,000
armor,
to
that
spend,
sword.
Yeah. And there's no way of getting it without paying for it. So you might get a faster entry point into it, or you might not have the time to fully make your team exactly how you want it. So you might spend some of the time that you the money that you have doing something else to fill out your team with that player that you just really need to fill that hole.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense. I was super deep into video games up until probably maybe 7th or 8th grade. And that was like right around the time that microtransactions and like loot boxes got really popular. So I was able to like live in the era where like pay to win wasn't really a thing. And so maybe there's a lot of other people who understood that nuance, but great point about the fact that like that ceiling is different in play to win, where if you don't have that item, literally it's like, OP times 1,000. Okay,
Yep.
cool. Thank you for clearing that up. Now, recently, the void pool mechanic was kicked off in the Cortex. So I didn't realize how time sensitive it was. I saw something about it a couple of days ago. Like, oh, okay, I'll check in on it. Just see, like, oh, nope, all the void pools have been stabilized. Can you talk about that, and then just in general, y'all's approach to combining utility with lore development in a way that goes beyond what is quite common in this space, where people just find some arbitrary way to reduce the supply so that they can artificially, play with the perceived value of the assets involved. So can you speak a little bit about the void pool, and then how that might also tie into the land that is these Gen 2 surfaces?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm really encouraged to see how the communities
jumped on it,
interact with. Yeah, jumped on it. And don't worry, for all you out there listening, they're not going to go away. This is going to be an ongoing thing. So if you've missed the opportunity so far, there'll be more opportunity to jump in and participate in the void pool. And they're also, you'll notice that they're spaced out throughout the days. So people in different time zones can get involved. So it's not just for people in North America.
That's inclusivity.
Or in New Zealand. Yeah. And I think a lot of people have assumed that you're supposed to go and get every single one of them.
Yeah.
They're like, what? But no, they're there.
Stabilize them all.
Yeah, they're there so that and they're spread out specifically so that we can get a lot of participation across the different time zones. Because we have a very international, multinational culture in our community, and we don't want to be excluding people as much as possible. But the mechanic itself is part of the story of the world of Valeria and the lore of the All Stars, and we're just wanting to build on that story in an interesting way. And provide that immersion to people that are playing the Cortex game. Essentially, is not and never has been a DeFi protocol, and we never. And I don't think it's. If you want to go do that, go jump into the other 1,000 DeFi projects out there that you can get involved in. You want to be part of exploring this world and this really interesting gamified AI space, then that's why you come to Alternate State Machine. We are not and never will be a DeFi protocol, and I think we're better off for that. For one, we're not a security, so that's nice. And I think a lot of people are going to, a lot of those DeFi protocols are going to start struggling with that in the coming years. But also, we want the economy and the mechanics of the world to make sense and to work in a play and earn kind of scenario, rather than a play to earn scenario. Because a play to earn becomes a job pretty quickly. Play and earn is something that happens while you're playing, but it's not your job.
Yeah. No. I think a lot of people will appreciate that it's more of a consequence of participation versus, the means or the end goal of participating. So want to be super mindful of you. Go ahead.
So I just want to maybe expand on it, which gives us the mandate that our games have to be fun first. Right.
Instead of lucrative first.
Yeah, instead of lucrative first. Which completely changes the game. And you can see that just in, you look at FIFA compared to a lot of blockchain gaming that we've been used to. Traditionally, the level of detail and the care and time that we put into curating that experience to be a beautiful, fun game, hopefully reflects our philosophy to say that we want to create fun games first. And I think you have to start from that perspective to get any chance at mass market adoption, and also to drive our point home that gamification of AI is fun.
Yeah, no, as it should and can be. So a few more questions, if we can try to power through them quickly. Some of them are a little bit over the place, but ultimately this is a protocol and people have to build on those protocols and create things. It can't just be ASM creating everything that ASM is able to do. And so that makes me think about the accelerator program that is going to be coming out shortly after Root launches in a more full capacity. And one of the questions I had there is one about the way y'all are thinking as far as who gets brought into that accelerator. And I know y'all mentioned that you plan to go through those cohorts pretty quickly and not make it where it's like, okay, there's 1 to 2 years of exclusive dev access for entities, you know, with this size of a development team, and then we'll get to the individual devs years down the road. And the other end of that question is me thinking about hardware, because going back to the personalization of data, I think about the things that people use for health monitoring. So the Aura rings, the Fitbits, the Woos, all of this other stuff, and also thinking about, you know, the potential VR integration with things like the Next Legend, and that being something to motivate people to stay active. So can you speak to how y'all are approaching that aspect of rolling out the development kit for people? What folks might be able to do now to prepare for that? And then how y'all are thinking about the potential integration with hardware that comes proprietary through ASM, and then also being able to integrate the protocol with hardware so that people can be in more control of their data instead of just trusting and believing that Apple's chip keeps it all private, which it probably does a better job than most, but you know, I haven't inspected it personally, so I can't vouch for it.
Yeah, wow, okay. So I think initially I'll address the developer kit. We'll actually be launching an early version of what we want to get out there to the community shortly. So just sort of a taste of what the platform is shaping up into. And we'll be pretty keen to get some feedback from people as quickly as possible on that. We're obviously, you know, our whole philosophy is eat your own dog food. So I don't know if that's a term y'all have over here.
It is.
It's okay, right? Essentially, yeah, using our own tools internally first, testing them and making sure they're working as intended, and then getting them out there to the public. So you'll start to see, you know, pieces of it start to pop up after we start to release functionality. And then we would hope to build on that platform and really make it a collaborative effort with the community on where it goes and what features and functionality it has going forward. So we're not too far away from the first sort of taste of that coming out, and people being able to play around with some of the tools. And in the next sort of few weeks, I think we potentially have something coming out, which is quite neat. As far as hardware integration goes, this is actually something that's close to my heart. I spent a bit of my career in the IoT space. Always had a passion for hardware and building everything from computers to, you know, my own, you know, hexacopter drones, self-autonomous drones.
Yeah.
I have another company that builds AI growing appliances for growing plants. Sort of hands-free, almost.
No, that's amazing. I grew microgreens and was looking at doing some automated vertical setups because I did some hydroponics, you know, but it's like really dialing that in.
Yeah, so I mean, this space is, I'm very passionate about this space. When it comes to hardware, we've got some interns, an intern that we've brought on, a really smart guy who's been working on some haptic feedback stuff as part of his, I think he's doing his master's at the moment, which is really interesting stuff. So we want to support those kinds of projects as well. But getting into sort of established hardware, it starts with creating good software. When it comes to doing partnerships, specifically in the fitness space. Funny how you should mention that. I've been personally thinking about some of the applications that we could have in the health and fitness space, and having worked on a little side project myself around around some of that stuff. So I might be in a space to talk about that at some point.
Nice.
So it's an area of great focus, but from a platform point of view, we want to make those tools and SDKs and APIs available to people who are working on specific hardware products to start integrating the technology at a native level.
Okay, I dig it. Appreciate you being comfortable talking about that, because I don't know, when I was preparing for this, it just hit me that like I couldn't recall someone ever really asking about the hardware side of this, because that's one of the best uses of AI, is to fine tune the mechanics of something that is physically in the real world, like dialing in the parameters when you're growing a setup to adjust the light on the fly and the humidity levels and all these other sort of things. And once again, it's like you may or may not really want that data to be super broadcast out. You want to be in more control of that. So excited to see what might come on that front. It's more of a nuanced question, but just today, man, I was in the underground. I was trying to switch out my sound on my Party Bear, and that joint was telling me it was going to be like $20. And I was like, damn, I don't know if I can do it right now. And it made me think about bridging the assets over to Root. And so obviously the Cortex has been a thing. The underground has been a thing, so I didn't expect to see ASM assets in the underground at this moment. But I'm curious, are there plans to have some sort of escrowed system that is basically some sort of way to minimize the cost so it's not prohibitive for people to get their existing ETH assets over to Root? I know they are going to be doing things in a phased manner, but is there anything more that hasn't already been discussed that you might be able to share about that process so that people, don't have to worry like, damn, it's going to cost me a whole ETH just to get my assets over?
Yeah, they're definitely working on making that as efficient as possible. Because of that reason, you can't be paying $20 for a transaction. It's just, it's not scalable, right? It goes against the philosophy of Futureverse. So that's the point of the Root network, is to make these systems more scalable. And altered state machine assets, just like all the rest of the ecosystem, will go through the same process. And the team is working pretty hard on making that bridging process as lightweight as possible.
Okay, good to know. And then one of the last things is Project Tempus. Now, some people... You said no. You said, Man, so some of us have speculated that the Honey Accords may have been a product of Project Tempus in some way, shape, or form. Now, I have a background in music, so even just the sonics behind that, I was just like, man, y'all, we know y'all got some crazy music partnerships, but y'all do a bang-up job on the music side of things, man. So anyhow, there were some people who really wanted me to ask and just do a check-in about Project Tempus, what's been going on there, and any sort of updates that you might have.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited about Project Tempus.
Can you describe what it is briefly too? Because I'm making an assumption again that a lot of people know what it is.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have made a bunch of assumptions about what it is. I don't know if they've come out and said what it is yet. Yeah, okay. But I'll talk about the things that I'm pretty sure are public knowledge.
Okay.
Obviously, it's comic related, and art related, and obviously it's very story driven. Operation going on there, and in the future there is also a whole bunch of other content, including games and stuff that are going to be based around this world that they're creating. The team behind it are quite a few of them are most of them are ex Altered State Machine and Ecosystem employees. Well, not still currently.
They're doing so well, they got to go on their own.
Yeah, that might happen at some point, and it'll be very sad. But very closely tied to the ecosystem, and they've been crafting the story for a while now. I really enjoy it, and I hope the rest of the community really enjoys it. They've been ready to go for a bit now, but we kind of held back to allow them the opportunity to launch on Root, which again, for that same issue you were just describing, you can't have $20 every time you want to transact to read a comic, right? We don't want to we want them to give them the best chance of sort of succeeding. So root network was obviously the path to that. So I hope you guys, everybody enjoys the story when it comes out, and I'm really keen to see where those boys can take their product and yeah, provide something really interesting, a new perspective on telling stories.
Right on. I'm looking forward to that as well. I enjoyed the Honey Accords much more than I just went into it like, hey, I want to stay up to speed, and I was like, man, this was really nicely well done. So
yeah, those guys as well. So I think that came out of the Shadows, the Honey Accords.
Okay.
Came out of the Shadows team. So we've got a lot of really, really awesome talent within the Futureverse family that can craft these really interesting stories, which is quite cool. But the Tempus boys are working on some really immersive storytelling tools. To, as you can see, they'll leak some of the more animated stuff where the story kind of pops out of the pages a little bit, which I think is going to be quite novel, and some more interesting stuff to come out in later versions where your assets are going to be part of the story, and you can craft your own unique story, which is really cool. And then moving that into more interactive games and sort of blurring the lines between, storytelling and gaming a little bit. Yeah, so they've got some cool stuff coming up.
I dig that. It just makes me think for a moment about, I forget the developer who did Beyond. They used to do these series of games on PlayStation, I think on Xbox as well, but like Detroit, and then I think Being Human was another one, but it's one of those games where you would have an input every few minutes, but it was really a story, and then it was kind of like based on the input, your reaction time, it affected how the story played out, but something where it blurred the line a bit between what is purely a game and what is purely a story, but ultimately it is a form of entertainment that is blending the mediums in a way that's more immersive as a result.
Yeah.
Wow. So before we get out of here, I just want to give you an opportunity to just share something else that might be on your mind. It could just be sharing something that, people don't know about you, just anything that you want to say, just final thoughts before we get out of here.
I just want to share my appreciation for the community supporting us to this point where we have, I look across the sort of blockchain space, and particularly the NFT and crypto space, and I just so thankful for the community that we've got every day. You all support us and are open, and you ask questions, and you're curious, and you give ideas and feedback, and everybody's kind to each other, which is a rare thing you find in the online world. It's sad to say, but it kind of is. But it just gives me kind of hope that it's possible, and the world that we're wanting to build, in this open collaborative community-based space that we're wanting to build is possible. So without everybody, I think I would lose hope pretty quickly. So I just want to say thanks.
No, I mean, I'll speak for myself personally, and I know that a lot of the community will reflect this sentiment, but I think y'all are seeing a reflection of the energy y'all carry forward. How y'all handle yourselves and how y'all communicate and what y'all give to the community. So I think that, people are really just reciprocating in a lot of ways, and you have attracted those sort of people by coming in and being really intent on building something, truly building something, and not just marketing something that can grab a hold. So yeah, we appreciate what y'all are doing, and it's the whole ecosystem has been something that is really outside of like Bitcoin and Ethereum as a technology. It's definitely been one of the things that's made me the most excited and looking forward to really see the sort of things that can be done, that can be built, and the sort of solutions that can come in a way that's not just a dry technical paper, but in a way that really is people just enjoying themselves, but it has so much purpose underneath it. So thank you as well. Thank you for making the time today. Thank you for being so diligent and making sure this happened, even though hell and high water literally was preventing this from happening several times. So thank you so much, David. Thank you to your team. And yeah, I look forward to catching up and speaking to you in another AMA soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Anytime. Thanks, mate.
All right. Take care.